to the government. I now call upon the Prime Minister to kickstart this debate.
Let's go here.
This is no.
This is no.
It's okay.
It's fine.
Why you are looking just yeah.
Hello, can you hear me at the back? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a value judgment debate to evaluate who is in the best position to use a groundbreaking technology such as Tony Stark's armour. So this is a judgment on whether the individual or the government is in the best position and whether then the individual should give up this kind of technology. We're going to see from that individual's perspective, not always necessarily Tony Stark, that such individuals then should, in principle and for practical reasons, give this up to the government. We have a very simple model here. We think this debate can only be based in responsible governments or Western liberal democracies. And secondly, we think that this person should give up the know-how and probably like a piece of sample of the armour or so be it. Like compensation and everything can be taken care of. So those nitty-gritty out. I'm going to do a couple of things in my speech today. First, I'm going to look at why the government should get it. Secondly, I'm going to look at why not the individual in this case. Thirdly, I'm going to look at capabilities and the difference, and then show you why the government should get it or why the individual should give it up. So let's look at the first thing. Why should the government get it? Because we think at the principal level, it is the government who has the mandate of the people. And given that the implications, both positive or negative, of this armour affect the people on the ground the most, we think the people need to have a direct stake in determining how this armour is used. Have a seat. We think for different reasons, be it homeland security, be it for protecting your soldiers in other nations, or so forth. We think that it's a democratic process that can best decide how this armour is put to use. Not only this armour, I think any groundbreaking technology has far-reaching implications beyond this particular individual alone, which means the stakes are so high that the government is in the best place to make a decision on the kind of implications that can be had from this technology. Have a seat, sir. But why don't we think that an individual then is in a place to make this decision? Because I think individuals, by the very being of being single or being an individual as the word goes, are greatly skewed by their own personal bias. Both by the circumstances they live in, are born with, or the people they interact with. But more than that, we cannot be reflective of the will of all people around them. We think that's what restricts individuals to the kind of myopic view that we think isn't correct given the sort of power that something such as this armour can have. But more than that, we think the government has less bias and is more representative of public opinion than individuals can ever be. Because all said and done, individuals can only process a certain amount of thought after a given point in time, which means they cannot reflect or cannot process the kind of range of opinions that would exist among members of the public. We think that's the problem. But we think even if we are able to assume that individuals are magnanimous, we don't think that's a guarantee of being magnanimous all the way through. Have a seat, sir. We think that's the problem. We think individuals have limited capacity to process the range of views. The government is necessarily more representative of what happens, and the government is a direct stake in reflecting the change in views, if ever there were, on how to use such technologies or how to use this armour in particular. We think that is why then individuals are incapable of doing so. Have a seat, sir. Let's look at other capabilities, right? And let's look at why then this is particularly important. Individuals. We think individuals can only be, like, it's one person at one point in time, which means he can only be at one place and cannot put this technology to its best possible use because he can only be in certain places at a certain point in time. Because we think the government can use this to create like several Iron Men or use this technology to put into much greater use and to much more use than we think individuals can. Before I move on to Ram.
So, in your invasion, the United States government was willing to nuke the city on Manhattan. How exactly are you planning to trust this form of government?
Within the government and the decisions it makes are eventually responsible to the people, which means as a society, we trust governments to make decisions in the larger view than people can, which means as a principle, we trust governments to make the decisions that reflect not only the long term but also the short term. Let's look at capabilities, because we think there are certain benefits that or capabilities that only governments have that these individuals need not. Let's look at more important things moving beyond this particular armour and moving into the broader debate of possible technologies. Because we think governments are capable of further research, development and improvements. We think that's particularly important given the sort of technology and given the sort of uses that this armour would have. We don't think individuals can do that. But we think more than that, governments are possibly bound by other things that individuals are not, which means probably things like international law, which means tight set policies bound by the constitution, which individuals are not. We think that's the benefit that governments give, which individuals cannot give in these cases, because individuals are only bound by a set of loosely defined morals, which are individualistic to them and not bound by a set of codified laws. We think that's the problem then that there exists in individuals rather than in government cases. But let's look at the last thing here, the continuity of the concept and its importance in determining the usability of this concept. Because we think individuals at the end of the day are like mere mortals. There's an end to how much use an individual can have to this concept or any groundbreaking technology. We think even successors or having some sort of continuity is particularly detrimental. But more than that, we think there's no guarantee of this policy or this sort of groundbreaking technology's policy being put to long-term use. We think that's the problem that comes about when individuals are placed in hold of this concept. We don't think the same problem exists with government. Why? Because the government isn't necessarily the best possible place to take a long-term view or long-term decision on how these technologies or such type of groundbreaking technologies can be put to use. Which means the governments might necessarily decide to have some sort of sharing between countries if necessary, or decide that a certain group of scientists are in the best possible position to ensure a continuity of this sort of concept, or to ensure more research and development, or to ensure improvements in this concept. Because we think this concept is not limited to Iron Man alone if this was the case, which means it could be used, for example, to protect your back attacks. It could be used, for example, for ballistic missiles if that might be, or for nukes if that were what he was talking about. We think that's the benefit that governments bring, not only in terms of continuity, but also in terms of the range of options they have to have greater capabilities for this kind of groundbreaking technologies. We think these are the benefits that we give you over the myopic view that individuals have. So I've spoken to you about a couple of things in today's debate. I've looked at first why government should do it, because the stakes are very vast, and the stakes are vast not for the individual, but for the whole public. We think that is why the public must have a stake in deciding what governments do with this. Secondly, we told you that individuals alone are not only mentally capable of processing the kind of range of views that people might have, but also have a physical limitation on the kind of views they can put into. But lastly, we also told you that there is a continuity of concept here that is involved, and that is why we think governments are in the best place to do so. Very proud to propose.